Hello and welcome to OOT, the Out of the Office Investigation. I'm Alex.
And I'm Ben. Alex, when we first started looking into this, my mind went straight to the usual places. Machu Picchu, golden cities lost in the clouds. But the more we dug in, the more I realized this is so much more than just a history lesson. What we're really doing here is trying to get inside a completely different way of seeing the world. A worldview that let a civilization thrive in one of the most challenging places on Earth, the Andes. It's really a story about adaptation, about a sacred connection to the land, and a powerful idea we're going to come back to again and again, reciprocity.
Oh, absolutely, Ben. And that proverb we started with just sets the stage perfectly. They tried to bury us, but they didn't know we were seeds. I mean, that speaks to a level of resilience that's just profound. It really makes you ask, what gives a culture that kind of strength? The kind of strength to go through something as world-shattering as the Spanish conquest and somehow still be here today. The answer isn't just in the stones of their cities. It's woven into the very fabric of their beliefs. So, to even start to get a handle on the Inca, we first have to wrap our heads around the basic ideas that shaped their reality. And that starts with how they saw time and space itself.
Right. And it all begins with this one single, really powerful word, pacha. Now, in our modern Western mindset, we tend to separate time and space, right? Something happens in a specific place at a specific time. But for the Andean people, pacha mashes those two concepts together into one unified whole. It's kind of like a song. You can't really separate the notes from the rhythm. They exist together to make the music. Well, to the Andean people, the entire universe was that song. Time wasn't a straight line moving forward. It was a cycle, like the seasons, like the moon. And this is so important, Alex, because it means the past is never really gone. It's always here, always present. The ancestors are always considered a part of the living community.
And if pacha is the fabric of their reality, then Aini is the thread holding it all together. And then this concept is just, it's everything. This idea of sacred reciprocity, today for you, tomorrow for me, is the absolute bedrock of their society. It's so much more than just, I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine. It's a cosmic law that applies to everything. You give an offering to Pachamama, Mother Earth, and she gives you a good harvest. The local community provides labor for the empire, and the empire gives back security and food. It's this constant, balanced flow of energy that links every person, every community, the state, and the gods into one massive living system. In our world, which is so often about competition, this idea of universal, mutual obligation is it's kind of staggering. It's the spiritual glue. And you can see that cosmic system mapped out right here. The universe is split into these three interconnected realms. You've got the condor way up top, for the Hanan Pacha, the upper world of the sun and stars. Then there's the puma in the middle, representing Kai Pacha, this world, where we live. And at the bottom, the snake symbolizes the Uku Pacha, the inner earth. But here's what's so fascinating to me, Alex. This is not like our idea of heaven, earth, and hell. It's not a hierarchy. They're all equally important, and they're all constantly interacting. The Uku Pacha isn't some place of punishment. It's the sacred home of the ancestors and the seeds. It's the source of all life and fertility. And the job of humans here in the Kai Pacha is to be the bridge, to keep the balance between the upper and inner worlds through rituals and, of course, through Aini.
So, Ben, we've laid out this massive cosmic map, but how does that actually affect a person's life day to day? We've seen the big picture, so now let's zoom in on the individual. In a world that's defined by this web of community and reciprocity, your value isn't measured by what you own or achieve for yourself. It's all about your role and what you contribute to your community, your aiju. It's a journey from being a seed to becoming an ancestor.
You're listening to OOTO with research by El Campesino.
Totally. And you can see that journey laid out so clearly here. It starts with being a wawa, an infant. Because infant mortality was so high, a baby was seen as a fragile seed, not quite rooted in the community yet. They wouldn't even get a real name until a haircutting ceremony around age 2 or 3, which was a sign that they'd made it through the most dangerous part of life. Then you become a warma, a helper, learning all the jobs of the community. After that comes waina, the golden age of strength. These are your soldiers, builders, messengers. But what really gets me is that you weren't considered a runa, a complete person, until you got married and took on leadership duties. Just think about that, Alex. Your identity as a full-fledged adult was totally defined by your partnership and your service to the group. It's such a different way to think about what it means to be an individual.
And it doesn't end there. The journey culminates in becoming a machu, an elder. And at this point, your role flips from physical strength to wisdom. Your job isn't to work in the fields anymore, it's to be a keeper of knowledge, an advisor on history, farming, and religion. You're seen as a direct link to the ancestors, which brings the whole cycle full circle. What's incredible is how the Inca government took this beautiful philosophical life cycle and weaponized it into the super efficient tool for running an empire. Look at this table. They created what the Spanish called the 10 rooms, basically a census system based on age. Every single person, from a newborn to an elder, had a specific category and a duty to the state. This wasn't just some abstract idea. It was a real-world database, recorded on those famous knotted strings called quepus, that let them manage labor and resources with just mind-boggling precision. Okay, so we've gone from the cosmos to the individual, and now our investigation brings us to the land itself. This is where you can literally see the Andean worldview written into the earth. For them, engineering wasn't just about building stuff, it was a sacred act. The Spanish chroniclers said they were stitching the human world to the divine landscape. They weren't trying to dominate nature, they were trying to start a conversation with it, to harmonize with the living spirits of the mountains and the earth. And that conversation begins with this absolutely brilliant idea, the vertical archipelago. The Andes are just this brutal landscape of steep slopes and wild climate changes as you go up, but instead of seeing that as a problem, they used it. A single community would control several ecological islands at different altitudes. You can see it here. They'd grow coca and fruit down in the warm valleys, corn and beans in the mid-altitudes, and then way up high, they'd have thousands of kinds of potatoes and their llamas and alpacas. This wasn't just about having a varied diet, it was a genius survival strategy. If a frost wiped out your potato crop up high, your corn down below would be fine. It created this amazing safety net. It's Aini, reciprocity, applied to the environment itself. And to connect all these vertical islands and everything else, they built the Capac Ñan, the Great Inca Road. And Alex, look at this number, 25,000 miles. Let that sink in for a minute. That's long enough to go all the way around the Earth. This was the logistical and really the spiritual backbone of the whole empire. It connected bone-dry deserts, thick jungles, and mountain peaks over 15,000 feet high. And you have to remember, they did all of this by hand. No wheel, no iron tools, no big animals to pull carts. It's just a mind-blowing achievement of human organization and a deep, deep respect for the land. And the roads were just the start. The way they actually built their cities and temples tells you so much about their psychology. Just look at this comparison. For the Incas, stone wasn't some dead material you could just use. It was a living thing with a spirit. You know their famous stonework, where these huge, weirdly shaped stones fit together so perfectly you can't even get a knife between them? That comes from a belief that the stones themselves wanted to be together. Their buildings were made to be flexible, to literally move with an earthquake instead of fighting against it. It's a totally different philosophy of building. And here's the key. They were building with the world, not just on it. It was about harmony, not conquest. You're listening to OOTO with research by El Campesino. So they've engineered this incredible sacred landscape. They've organized their society around their cosmology. But Alex, that brings us to the next massive question in our investigation. How in the world do you run this whole thing? How do you manage an empire that stretches from modern-day Colombia all the way down to Chile, with millions of people who speak dozens of different languages? That's the billion-dollar question, isn't it, Ben? I mean, our entire world is built on writing. Laws, contracts, history, everything. The idea of running an empire this huge and this complex without a single written word is almost impossible for us to imagine. Their solution had to be something totally different, a system that wasn't about paper and ink, but about memory, organization, and people. Right, so let's break down how this incredible system worked. First, you've got the hardware, the quipu. And you can see them here. These are not just simple knots to jog your memory. This is a complex 3D system for storing data. The color of the string, the type of knot, where it was on the cord, all of that meant something specific. Experts, called kibukamayokes, could read these to track the census, what was in the storehouses, who owed labor. Then you have the network, the chasquis. These guys were elite relay runners. One would sprint a few miles to the next little station, pass the message or the quipu, and the next runner would take off. The result? A message could fly up to 150 miles in a single day. The emperor in Cusco could get news from the edges of his empire faster than a Roman emperor on a chariot. And all that information, all those quipus being run up and down the roads by the chasquis, it all flowed to the heart of the empire, which they called Tawantinsuyu. And the name itself, as you can see, literally means the four regions together. The entire empire was designed like a giant cross, with 4 huge administrative regions, or suyus, all meeting at one single point in the center, the capital, Cusco. And Cusco wasn't just a political capital, it was the cosmological center, the navel of the world. It was the place where the 4 corners of the earth came together and where the human world and the divine world were closest. And the engine that made this whole massive machine run was the Midas system. What I love about this slide is it shows how the Midas was just Ailani on a massive scale. It's that same idea of reciprocity, but for an entire empire. The community didn't pay taxes with money. They didn't have any. They paid their tribute with labor. For a set part of the year, people would go work on state projects, and in return, the state gave back. It gave out food from giant storehouses when there was a famine. It built the roads and bridges everyone used. It provided security. It was this grand social contract, a huge bargain built on that exact same idea of today for you, tomorrow for me, that ran every part of village life. So Ben, up to this point, we've been looking at this world that's so beautifully balanced and interconnected. It's cyclical, it's reciprocal, it's tied to the land. But now our investigation has to turn to the moment that this world smashes into another one, a world that was linear, that was extractive, and was just completely, utterly alien to the Indian way of thinking. This is the story of 2 cosmologies colliding and one trying to completely obliterate the other.
You're listening to OOTO with research by L. Campesino.
The speed of it all is just staggering. This wasn't some empire in decline. It was at the absolute peak of its power. But then it got hit by this horrible, perfect storm of disasters. First, around 1528, a plague, almost definitely smallpox, which had drifted down from Mexico, kills the emperor and his heir. This creates a power vacuum, which then explodes into a 5-year civil war between 2 brothers, Huáscar and Atahualpa. The empire is literally tearing itself apart. And at that exact moment of weakness, Francisco Pizarro shows up with only 168 men. He ambushes and captures Atahualpa, holds him for this unbelievable ransom in gold and silver, and then just kills him anyway. Within a year, the Spanish are in Cusco, and the empire as an institution is broken.
And this quote from the Spanish requerimiento, it's so critical for understanding the psychological crash that was happening. This was an official document the Spanish would read out loud, demanding that native people submit to them. Just listen to that language. Quote, "We shall make war on you. Seize your women and children. The deaths will be entirely your fault." It's the complete opposite of Aini. There is zero reciprocity. It's a one-way street. Submit or we take everything and it's your fault. For a culture built entirely on balanced exchange, this was just incomprehensible. It was a worldview of total domination, a threat of taking without giving, which was the absolute antithesis of their entire cosmic order.
And yet, here's the crazy paradox, Alex. At the exact same time they were tearing this civilization down, the conquistadors were completely in awe of it. So on the one hand, you have the absolute violence of the requerimiento, and on the other, you have guys like the chronicler Pedro Cieza de Leon just marveling at the Inca roads, writing that nothing built by the Romans or Alexander the Great could even compare. I mean, how do you square that circle? They were simultaneously destroying a world that they couldn't help but admire. It's just this deep, tragic contradiction right at the heart of the whole thing. Which brings us to our last section, Ben, and it might be the most important one. Because the empire fell, but the people and their worldview, they didn't disappear. Our investigation can't just end with destruction, because that isn't where the story ends. We have to look at the endurance, at the seeds that were planted long before the Spanish ever arrived and that are, against all odds, still growing today. This concept of Pachacuti is the absolute key to understanding their resilience. From our Western linear point of view, the conquest was an ending, the end, story over. But if you see time as a circle, like the Andean people do, it was a Pachacuti, a turning over of the world, a cataclysm. Now, that doesn't make the horror and trauma any less real, not at all, but it reframes it. It suggests that this current moment of chaos and imbalance isn't permanent. It turns the idea of simple revenge into this deep, patient faith that the world will eventually turn over again and balance will come back. It creates what some people call resistance through existence. And that leaves us with our final question, the one that really pulls this whole investigation together. If your entire reality is based on cyclical time, where the past is always alive and the future is a return to balance, can you ever really truly be conquered? The formal empire of Tawantinsuyu is gone, yes, but the ideas of Aini, the love for Pachamama, and the belief in an eventual Pachacuti, those are still alive in millions of people today.
Which brings us right back to where we started, doesn't it? They tried to bury us, but they didn't know we were seeds. Maybe the greatest thing the Andean world left behind isn't the stone of Machu Picchu, but the incredible power of a worldview that can see even the most catastrophic ending not as the final word, but as the fertile ground for a new beginning.